beauty, welcome back to my channel. Today we're back to continue our read aloud read along of Maya Angelou's second memoir, Gather Together in My Name. We've been reading together chapters of her first memoir and now we're on to her second. Previous videos have been linked in a playlist there in the description box down below, so if you'd like to read the first memoir along with me, or if you'd like to listen to previous videos in this series, then you can click the playlist and start there. Otherwise, today we are up to chapter 12, which in this edition of the book begins on page 50. And it's a pretty long chapter, so let's get to reading. If you have a copy of the book, you can read along with me. Otherwise, you could just listen to me read. Chapter 12. On the blocks where Saturday night revelers rambled, Sunday afternoons were given over to the godly. They filled the streets with a mighty thronging, vestiges of a recent contact with God the Father lying brightly on a few faces. Most gossiped, shared confidences, checked others' Sunday go-to-meeting clothes, and then spun from the crowd to head homeward. Growing up, becoming responsible, having to think ahead and assuming the postures of adulthood had certain compensations for me. One that I weakly appreciated was the freedom to sleep late on Sundays. Somehow the bed was more sensual on that morning than weekdays. I loved the soul-stirring songs and heartily approved of the minister's passions. But being penned shoulder to shoulder with a rocking crowd of strangers for 3 hours or more did nothing for my soul. I maneuvered through the churchgoers, listening for and hearing. The Reverend sure spoke today. That's the truth, child. He did it today. Reverend was talking to my soul this morning. Bless your heart, mine too. It's a wonderful thing to go into the house of the Lord. That's the truth. The sounds waved like pretty ribbons and belonged to me. I understood them all. I was a part of that crowd. The fact of my southern upbringing, the fact of my born blackness, meant that I was, for the rest of my life, a member of that righteous band and would be whether or not I ever went to church again. The small white house sat squarely in a dirt yard. A few roses tried vainly to grow along a wire fence. Johnny Mae opened the door, and from her taut smile, I knew my blunt words of the other night might have been forgiven, but they were not forgotten. Beatrice came from the rear of the house and stood beside Johnny Mae. Both of them talked at once. You made it. We didn't think you were going to. We just got back from church. Just changed our clothes. They had changed into matching white t-shirts and pedal pushers. In southern towns, the people my grandmother called worldly socialized on Saturday night, while the godly entertained and were entertained in cool parlors on Sunday. The black people brought that custom north along with their soft speech and remembered recipes. Since my hostesses and I were southern, I expected to sit at an overloaded table giving fulsome compliments while they plied me with just one more helping. Come in, take the weight off. Hope you're not starving. I'm just starting to cook. They were as nervous as I. I moved into the tiny room and immediately felt too big for it. Thought you were going to bring the baby. He was asleep. I'll go back early and take him for a walk. That was going to be my excuse to get away. Well, what do you think of our house? I hadn't had a chance to look around before. I noticed that the walls were bare and there were no books, but furniture they had plenty. A fat, overstuffed rust sofa pressed its matching chair into a corner. 2 large chairs, more accidental than incidental, stood pompous against the other wall. Little clear glass lamps, topped with white frilly shades, sat on 2 end tables. Things took up all the air. Come on, sit a rest before you sit down. Johnny Mae's pride carried us into a bedroom while Beatrice went back to the kitchen. Have you ever slept in a round bed before? I hadn't, and I hadn't seen one either. It didn't seem appealing, although it was covered with a blue satin spread which matched its curves. When Beatrice has her flowers, she sleeps in here. I followed her into a monastic cell. A small cot and an old dresser were the room's only furnishings. No lamps, no doilies. Her flowers? I wasn't really so curious as I was uncomfortable. Johnny Mae said, her monthlies. I don't get them anymore. I had an operation. If she wasn't so scared of hospitals, she'd have one too. An operation? I was young, but I was also stupid. Had my ovaries and all that mess taken out. Bea ought to get it done too. After all, I'm not about to give her any babies, am I? She hunched me and winked. I must have returned the wink. I don't know. But I was thinking of the stupidity which got me in the predicament. The big, generous, unprejudiced spirit which had got me hooked up with two lesbians of heavy humor. It's nice. Your house is really very nice. I mean, it reflects your taste and your personalities. I always say if you want to know a woman, I mean a person, go to their house. It will tell you. I knew that words, despite the old saying, never fail. And my reading had given me words to spare. I could, and often did to myself or my baby, recite whole passages of Shakespeare, Paul Laurence Dunbar poems, Kipling's If, County Cullen, Langston Hughes, Longfellow's Hiawatha, Arna Bontemps. Surely I had enough words to cover a moment's discomfort. I had enough for hours if need be. Back on the prickly sofa, Johnny Mae offered me dubonnet. I held a glass of thick, sweet wine as protection. Thinking she would hesitate to pounce on me if there was a chance I would spill the wine on her furniture, I kept it in front of me like a shield. Beatrice, come out here. You're not chained to the stove. She looked at me and raised thick eyebrows. Johnny Mae had the infuriating habit of making anyone she spoke to into a fellow conspirator. I raised my eyebrows back at her as if I understood her meaning. Beatrice came into the room, a sprinkling of perspiration dotting her face. Now, baby, you don't want no black chicken, do you? Beatrice was teasing, flirting. If that chicken gets any darker than you, I'll have to whip your rusty dusty. They were a comedy team. If I had heard that exchange at the club, I would have joined their laughter, but perched, guarded in the cluttered room, I couldn't find anything funny. I laughed. Come here, you sweet thing. Beatrice obeyed and stood like a little chubby girl in front of Johnny Mae. Bend down. Johnny Mae raised her face and the two women's lips met. I watched and saw their tongues snaking in and out. Except in movies, I had never even seen men and women kiss passionately. They pulled apart and looked at me in a practiced gesture. For a second, I was too embarrassed to have been caught watching, and in the next second, I knew they had wanted me to see. Even after I told them I had no interest in lesbianism, they thought the sight of women kissing would excite me. I hated their stupidity. But more than that, I hated being underestimated. If they only knew they could strip buck naked and do the sassy Sue wiggle, and I would continue to sit with my legs crossed, sipping the Dubonnet. Beatrice's laughter floated over her shoulder as she headed back to the kitchen. Johnny Mae looked at me and by leering, tried to include me in her appreciation. Beatrice would make a rabbit hug a hound. She grunted like a pig. Because laughter seemed to be the safest sport in the house, I laughed and said, "Where do you work? I mean, both of you." "Right here, flat on our backs." Nothing embarrassed the woman. "We both take 2 all-night tricks apiece once a week. Comes to $200. We more than get by." She indicated the sofa and chairs. As you can see. Lesbian prostitutes? Did they trick with women? I ached to know. How did they pick them up? I had never heard of women hustling other women, but surely they didn't go to bed with men. I fished for a way to put my question. Johnny Mae looked around the room, her eyes counting and loving the many pieces of furniture. Her head finished its semicircle and I was back in her vision. "We're going to have to move, you know." The question was foolish. Not only did I not know, I didn't care. And if I'd had the chance to think about it, I'd have thought it was a good thing too. But the landlord doesn't like us. He's a church deacon, he says. But the real reason is that his son is a F word. Goes around wearing women's clothes. So the old man can't stand gay people. She was happy to grin, thinking of the man's unhappiness. I told him so too. She shrugged her shoulders against the fates. "We'll find another place. I hate to move though. I mean, we painted this place ourselves." The walls were pea yellow in the living room. We call this our honeymoon cottage. Beatrice planted the roses. I felt there was something I was supposed to say, something like, "You have my deepest sympathy." For some reason, at that moment, I thought about Curly and did in fact feel sorry for the two women. N-words make me sick, and N-word men make me sicker than that. She might have been thinking of her landlord, but it seemed she was reading my mind and had the audacity to mean Curly. She would have lost my sympathy anyway. I hated the word N and never believed it to be a term of endearment, no matter who used it. Now you tell me, we've been wondering about you. How come you're working as a waitress? You speak such good English, you must have a diploma. Yes, I do. Shock pushed my voice out. You mean you graduated from high school? Yes. And work as a waitress? Well, I can't type or take shorthand or... You remind me of Beatrice. She shouted, Beatrice, come here! I feared I was going to have to sit through the kissing again. Beatrice stood at the door leading to the living room. What's on your mind? Johnny Mae didn't have time for fun. B, Rita's just like you. She finished high school. Beatrice, knowing that wasn't such a grand feat, said, really? Got your diploma, huh? Johnny Mae answered for me. Sure, she got it. I work as a waitress. I started to explain, but she stopped me. Beatrice was a WAC, a corporal. It was hard to believe that all that soft-looking flesh had been contained in an army uniform. When she got out, she went to work. That's where we met, at some rich old woman's house. Bea was the cook, and I was the housekeeper. I took one look at Bea, and I have been keeping her ever since. Break for peals of laughter. That's the end of chapter 12. We'll be back next time to read chapter 13 in this second of Maya Angelou's 7 memoirs gathered together in my name. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Subscribe if you want to see more. We'll be back next time to continue reading. I'd love to hear from you if you're enjoying this reading. And what do you think is going to happen in the next chapter? How is Maya Angelou's character going to get out of this relationship that she seems to have struck up with these two women? It feels like she doesn't really want to be there. I'd love to hear what you think is going to happen next. So let's talk in the comments, and until next time, happy reading. Bye.